My parents supported my sister in her attempt to take my son, even filed for full custody, alleging I had promised her the baby. What unfolded next completely derailed their scheme. I'm John, a 31-year-old man who became a father a few months ago. When my son was born, I thought I knew exactly what kind of dad I'd be. Protective, involved, maybe a bit overwhelmed. I never once imagined that my own family would become the biggest danger to my child's well-being. I grew up in a small town where appearances were everything. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and nothing went unnoticed. My parents had deep ties there. My father sat on almost every community committee imaginable, and my mother was the unofficial queen of church. In school fundraising, to outsiders, they were seen as respectful, generous, and kind. But behind closed doors, their world revolved around control and their family's legacy. My older sister Rachel is 35. For nearly a decade, she and her husband, Brian, had been trying to have a child. They explored every avenue, multiple IVF rounds, fertility specialists in a neighboring city, and even a brief, heartbreaking adoption search. When they finally gave up, Rachel spiraled. Every holiday turned into a mourning session for what she'd lost. Every conversation inevitably circled back to parenthood and how unfair life had been to her. I never anticipated having a baby so soon. Martha and I were still figuring out our lives together. Nothing extravagant, no grand plans. We were content. When she got pregnant, we were surprised, but we both knew we wanted to keep the baby. We made it work by moving in, setting a budget, and making compromises. We were young parents, yes, but we were ready. When we told my parents, their disappointment was palpable. They didn't yell or directly criticize us. Instead, they showed their disapproval with overly tight smiles, questions that felt more like veiled threats, and constant reminders of how things used to be done. We weren't expecting a celebration, but we did hope for some warmth. Instead, it felt like we had somehow shamed them. Yet after our son James was born, things seemed to shift. At first it was subtle. My mother would drop off meals, but always with a remark about Martha's exhausted look. Rachel arrived with boxes of baby clothes, some still tagged. She'd ask about our nursery theme, which we hadn't even thought about, and then immediately start offering suggestions. Pinterest boards, color palettes, diaper brands. It felt less like she was helping us, and more like she was preparing for her own child. Martha and I were overwhelmed with joy. We were exhausted from learning everything on the fly, and accepting help felt easy. But something felt off. Rachel would hold James for hours, refusing to let him go. She'd whisper things like, "Mama Roch is here," and giggle as if it were a private joke. Then she started showing up unannounced. One time, I found her in our living room holding James while Martha was napping nearby. She'd used a spare key she'd gotten from my parents when they owned our house. We changed the locks immediately after that. Instead of condemning Rachel's behavior, my parents actually encouraged it. They offered to take James for the weekend so we could get some rest. They presented it as helpful support, but Martha and I noticed how they phrased it, almost as if they were trying to establish a more permanent arrangement. Each time we declined, the atmosphere grew tense. My mother would grumble that we were being overly protective, and my father would advise me to think long-term. Then came the dinner that made everything crystal clear. It was supposed to be a casual family meal. Martha and I brought James, and halfway through, Rachel just grabbed him and declared, right in front of everyone, "He feels like the child I was meant to have." No one reacted. My mother reached out and squeezed Rachel's hand, as if she'd said something brave. My father looked at me as if I was being unreasonable for not responding. I looked at Martha across the table. Her expression was unreadable, but I knew she was done. She didn't say another word the rest of the night. As I was leaving, my father stopped me. He told me Rachel had endured so much, and perhaps this was a chance for us to heal as a family, suggesting this child could benefit more than just us. He even used the word selfless. He spoke of legacy and the importance of putting family first. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't just grief. This wasn't misguided affection. This was a calculated effort, subtle and intentional, disguised. by politeness and emotional manipulation, but a strategy nonetheless. A scheme to take our son and rewrite his life story to fit their narrative, not ours. A plan to give Rachel the motherhood she'd always craved, regardless of who actually brought the child into the world. And in that moment, I understood that. They would stop at nothing. No guilt, no manipulation, no familial ties were off limits. Martha and I sat in silence for a long time after dinner. Then she shared something I hadn't known. Weeks prior, during one of Rachel's visits, Rachel had approached her and outright begged for full custody of James, not just to help raise him or babysit. She claimed it would heal the family and tried to sound magnanimous, as if we'd still be in James's life, just without the burden of being parents. Martha had kept quiet until then, hoping it was an isolated incident. But Rachel had followed up twice. That was it.
Oh!
No more guessing, no more hoping they'd stop on their own. We made 3 decisions that night. First, Rachel would never be alone with James again. Second, there would be no more unannounced visits. Third, Rachel would not see James unless both Martha and I were present, and it had to be planned in advance. The next morning, I called my parents. I calmly explained everything, emphasizing that these were boundaries, not punishments. My mother refused to listen. She accused Martha of trying to alienate me and tear the family apart. She insisted it was all emotional manipulation. I told her it wasn't up for debate. We were James's parents, and this was our decision. She hung up on me mid-sentence. 2 days later, my father showed up at our apartment without calling first. Martha took James into the bedroom while I stepped outside. He started with casual small talk, as if he were just dropping by, before quickly pivoting to guilt. He brought up Rachel's suffering, her years of failed treatments, and how hard it had been for her. I let him finish, then told him again, this wasn't happening. He looked me in the eye and said, Rachel deserved to be a mother more than you deserve to. Be a father. I didn't respond. I walked inside, locked the door, and blocked his number. Then I told Martha we needed to start documenting everything, every message, every unannounced visit, every confrontation. This was no longer emotional. It was strategic. Rachel showed up uninvited the next day, having buzzed our building using a different number. She carried a large box of baby clothes and toys, like she was delivering a gift. Martha was home alone with James. Rachel refused to leave, so Martha stepped out onto the porch to talk. Rachel started screaming, accusing Martha of being selfish and cruel, and insisting that this baby belonged to her. She even tried to push past Martha into the house. That's when I pulled up. I'd left work early because Martha wasn't answering her phone. Her hands were full. I got out, walked straight to the porch, and stood between them. Rachel asked if we could talk. I said no. I told her this behavior wasn't normal, and she needed to leave. She didn't argue. She just stood there crying until Martha went inside and closed the door. Then Rachel turned and left. That evening, my parents invited us to a family dinner. Didn't want to go. She felt it was a setup. I told her I'd go alone to try and keep the peace, and she reluctantly agreed. When I walked into my parents' house, I immediately noticed the signs. Extra chairs and extended family members I hadn't seen in months. Rachel was on the couch, teary-eyed, holding a framed picture of James. This was exactly what Martha had warned me about. As soon as dinner started, Rachel stood up and began talking about how difficult it had been to watch her future disappear. My mother sat beside her, nodding, and my father stared at me as if he expected me to say something profound. One of my aunts squeezed Rachel's hand and whispered, "Maybe there's still a way this can work out for everyone." I stood up. I told them that James wasn't a shared family asset. He wasn't a community project. He was our son. Their actions weren't. Born of love, it was pressure disguised as anguish, presented to us as a responsibility. I left before dessert. When I got home, Martha had already packed a small overnight bag. She'd seen my cousin's message about the dinner and didn't want to be home if someone showed up again. We stayed at a motel for one night, which gave us ample time to think. The next morning, we contacted a family lawyer who explained everything. What had happened, who had shown up, the messages, the comments, the cafe incident, and the emotional toll. He listened, took notes, and told us we were making the right move by pursuing legal action early. He instructed us to document everything, not just texts and emails, but every phone call, unexpected visit, and interaction. He also made it clear. Legally, we were in the right, but we needed to be prepared for further escalation. He commented that families like this rarely back down easily when they believe they're acting for the greater good. Martha and I agreed to keep communication to a minimum. We blocked Rachel. I kept my mother's number for emergencies, but Martha blocked all of her known numbers, emails, and social media. We created a new, exclusive network of trusted contacts. We changed our door locks again. From that point forward, every decision we made centered on one thing: protecting James, not from strangers, but from those who claim to love him most. Our lawyer wasted no time. He explained exactly what needed to happen next. Legally, we were on solid ground, but we had to document everything: texts, voicemails, surprise visits, even secondhand communications. More proof was always better. He stressed that if boundaries were repeatedly crossed, we could consider a formal cease and desist order and a full no-contact order if things escalated further. 3 days later, Martha received a message from an old college acquaintance she hadn't spoken to in over a year. The message was unexpected, long, emotional, and clearly not written by her friend. It said things like, "Think about the sisterhood, and Rachel deserves to be a mother too." Rachel had clearly contacted that friend, immediately blocked her. I called the friend from a different phone, briefly told her we knew she was relaying Rachel's messages, and warned her that anyone acting as a messenger would be cut out of our lives without further notice. Then I checked my inbox.
There was
An email from a new address my mother had never used before. It wasn't just a message. It had an entire document attached to PDF titled Co-Parenting Plan for James. Inside, there were headers, bullet points, and a schedule breakdown. It even included sections like weekends with Rachel, holiday rotation, trial guardianship. My mother had written it like a business proposal. Her tone was formal and polite, but the message was clear. They still thought this was negotiable. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to our lawyer and saved it in the folder we now updated daily. The file was already growing rapidly with timestamps, screenshots, transcripts, and printed documents. It was no longer just about family. It was a full-blown campaign. Martha's parents visited that weekend. I noticed the packed bags by the door, the strain in our daily routine, and how we quietly checked the windows every night. After dinner, her father pulled me aside, told me they'd help cover the costs if we decided to move. No questions, no conditions, just get somewhere safe. A few days later, something else confirmed our fears. At work, my manager approached me in the hallway, cautiously asking if everything was okay at home. Apparently someone in town had expressed concern for James's well-being. I pressed him on who said it. He didn't know the source, but it had prompted his inquiry. That was all the confirmation I needed. That afternoon, I met with the Human Resources Department. I explained everything, holding nothing back, and provided a brief written report for the record, just in case. They promised to flag any external inquiries about me and alert me if anything suspicious came up. It was the first time I had to involve my job, but it wouldn't be the last. That same week, Rachel confronted Martha again. This time, Martha was alone at a small cafe near our apartment. Rachel approached without warning and tried to sit with her. Martha didn't engage. She left her coffee on the table and walked away. When she got home, she didn't say a word. She just handed me the scarf she'd dropped in her haste and closed the bedroom door behind her. That night, our lawyer sent Rachel a formal no-contact notice. It was drafted and delivered by his office. The terms were clear: no texts, no phone calls, no third-party communication, and no physical approach. Any violation would result in further legal action. That warning was also added to our growing file, with a copy delivered to Martha's cafe. In case Rachel returned, we took decisive action that night. Martha and I both changed our phone numbers. We created a list of essential contacts, people we trusted completely, and only shared our new numbers with them. Everyone else was cut off. Family members who hadn't spoken up were excluded. Friends who remained neutral were removed. We weren't taking any more chances. The next day, I discreetly started looking into new rentals. We needed something far enough outside our town that we wouldn't encounter anyone from our current life. Martha's parents helped us narrow down the options. That weekend, we toured a place under a different identity using a temporary email address and a cash deposit. We provided no forwarding address. No one in our family was told. Martha packed up James's belongings. The following day, I took time. Off work without explanation, we began planning a secret move. No social media updates, no announcements. We even turned off location sharing on our phones. The less people knew, the better. Because after everything emails disguised as contracts, third parties showing up at cafes, and lies told to my boss, one thing was clear. This wasn't going to stop on its own. If we wanted peace, we had to seize it. No one was going to hand it to us. We finalized the lease on a small rental house 2 towns away. It was a quiet neighborhood on a dead-end street with minimal foot traffic and no familiar neighbors. Paid the deposit in cash using a temporary email. Scheduled the move for a weekday and booked the moving company under a new name. We carefully packed, taking only what we needed. Everything else was either donated or left behind. No goodbyes. No notifications, and no social media. Our lawyer sent Rachel an official cease and desist letter the same morning we signed the new lease. It clearly stated that any future contact, in person or through third parties, would be considered harassment and dealt with legally. A certified copy was mailed to her home, and another was delivered to her office. Our lawyer warned us to expect pushback, and he was right. The next day I received an email from Rachel's husband, Brian. He wrote as if he were trying to mediate, asking if we could find a peaceful resolution. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to our lawyer, who documented it and added Brian's name too. The no contact rules. No contact meant no contact from either side. Brian's email address was reported and blocked. That seemed to be the end of that. 3 days later, around midday, my mother appeared outside my office building. Stood near the parking lot loudly and repeatedly calling my name. She had never visited my office before. I walked back inside and went straight to human resources. Security cameras had already captured her. HR promptly updated the internal security policy. My file now had a restricted access note. No family members were permitted on site without written notice and approval. That night, Martha received an unexpected flower delivery. There was no card, just a short note inside that read, "You stole what should have been mine." She didn't touch the flowers. We photographed everything, the box, the letter, the timestamp, then called the police. An officer responded, took a report, and marked it as a potential threat. We sent our lawyer a scanned copy of the report that same day. He added it to the expanding file. That evening, I installed new security cameras. Every door, window, and motion sensor was connected to cloud storage with 24/7 backup. I granted our lawyer remote access to the feed and footage. We weren't waiting for something to happen. We were going to be prepared before anything did. Meanwhile, a friend sent me screenshots of Rachel's friends making vague, indirect statements online about parents who don't deserve their children and selfish decisions that hurt good people. They didn't name us. They didn't have to. The language was pointed, and the timing was obvious. I captured screenshots, dates, usernames, and captions. Everything was documented. A week after we moved, one of my aunts, who had been silent until then, contacted me discreetly. She apologized for not speaking up sooner. She'd been observing from the sidelines, hoping it would pass, but now she was hearing things that concerned her. Rachel had told several relatives that she'd been robbed of her child, claiming she'd been promised guardianship, even though no such discussion ever occurred, and we never changed our minds after promising her guardianship. None of it was true. My aunt sent screenshots from a family group chat. My parents were in it, openly calling me unstable and portraying Martha as manipulative. That was the final straw. Martha and I stopped communicating with anyone other than our lawyer and 2 trusted friends. We updated our emergency contacts. We changed all mailing addresses to a private mailbox in a different town. Even James's pediatrician was transferred to one near our new home. No forwarding address, no record sharing.
Ow.
2 days after we moved in, the police arrived at our newest home. It was a welfare check. The officer stood on our porch, calm but firm, explaining that someone had reported us missing and that James might be in danger. Martha held James while I presented the officer with all our documents, the cease and desist letter, the police report from the flower incident, our lawyer's legal file, and security footage from the past 2 days. The officer asked for identification, then walked through the house. He spoke to Martha separately before speaking to me. He confirmed the report came from my parents. They had told the police we'd vanished, and that James might not be safe. Before leaving, the officer urged us to file for a formal restraining order. He described the pattern as clear, escalating, personal, and relentless. He gave me a card with a case number and suggested we follow up at the local station. He also flagged our address as a known issue, implying any future reports would be handled differently. I closed and locked the door behind him. We were no longer just protecting our home. We were building a legal case, piece by piece. Martha and I met with our lawyer the morning after the welfare check to file a protective order against Rachel, my mother and my father. We brought everything: copies of police reports, screenshots, camera footage, timestamps, emails, the cease and desist letter, and the flower message. The lawyer compiled it all into one harassment filing. It was over 2 inches thick. He suggested we start maintaining a printed, time-stamped timeline to keep everything organized. We added new entries to the file daily, linking them to corresponding evidence and images, letters, recordings, anything traceable. 3 days later, another legal document arrived. This time, it was from my father's attorney, a request for grandparent visitation privileges. They had filed a motion with the court claiming a deep relationship with James and demanding regular access. Our lawyer immediately filed an objection, providing a detailed report showing that my parents had never actually cared for James, not overnight, not when he was sick, and not during our work hours. All past interactions had been limited, and recent contact had been deemed hazardous. The objection was approved without a hearing. Their claim was denied. That same week, a package arrived at our front door with no return address. Inside was a small stuffed teddy bear. Martha immediately noticed something unusual. Its eyes seemed particularly shiny. She held it up to the light, revealing a tiny blinking red dot behind one of the plastic pupils. We didn't touch it after that, sealed it in a plastic bag, and called the police. Officers arrived and confirmed Martha's suspicions. It contained a hidden camera. They accepted it as evidence and updated our file. This was the most dangerous escalation yet. If the behavior continued, our lawyer began preparing to request an emergency hearing. Later that evening, I received a message from a relative. He'd never been involved before, never commented or reached out, but this time, he did. He said he had something we needed to see and showed us screenshots of a group chat where Rachel was talking with several mutual friends. In the texts, she instructed them on how to portray Martha as emotionally unstable, how to subtly note troubling behavior, and how to imply neglect without making direct accusations. It wasn't just talk, it was a coordinated slander campaign. Our lawyer started drafting a slander lawsuit. We hadn't filed it yet, but whenever something was said publicly or reiterated to authorities, it would be lodged. The screenshots from my cousin's phone were added to the file. We also modified every aspect of our lives to remove our family's access. James's new pediatrician was informed about the situation. His medical records were altered to omit any identities associated with my parents or Rachel. There were no exceptions. Martha's parents and our 2 closest friends were our only emergency contacts. We double-checked daycare enrollment and updated the contact forms there as well. Martha went through her own contact list, removing any mutual acquaintances who had ignored our boundaries or forwarded seemingly harmless messages from Rachel. Anyone who showed even a single warning sign was cut off. A week later, Martha went to a store near our new home to pick up a few things. She called me as soon as she returned, calm but alert. While walking through the parking lot, she noticed someone following her. When she turned, it was my mother. She didn't speak. She just stood half-hidden behind a car before leaving. When Martha started recording, raising her phone, my mother immediately turned and walked away without a word. We submitted the video that night. It was added to the protective order file. This was the third direct appearance after receiving a written legal warning. The next morning, I went to our leasing office and requested that our lease be amended to keep our address private in all public and government-accessible property records. They processed the adjustment immediately. From then on, even postal records would show our information as restricted. A week passed with no new contacts. James had his first appointment with his new pediatrician. The doctor performed a thorough examination and confirmed James was healthy, well-fed, clean, and had a strong emotional bond with his parents. There were no concerns. We asked the doctor to keep the visit notes on file in case they were needed for court documents, and he agreed.
After
Weeks of high alert, we finally took a break. Martha's parents agreed to watch the house for a few days. We drove 2 hours to a quiet cabin with no cell service, internet, or interruptions. It was just the three of us, Martha, James, and me. We brought books, food, and a second-hand instant camera. It was the first time in months we had no warnings, no knocks, no strange deliveries, no unexpected cars, and no reports to file. We stayed for 2 nights and didn't discuss court dates, lawyers, or family. For those 48 hours, there was only solitude, trees, and room to breathe. We knew it wasn't over, but for once it had paused. We returned from the cabin on a Sunday night to find a white envelope taped to our front door. Inside was a legitimate court summons. Rachel had filed for full custody of James. The documents were thick, formally printed, and serious. She claimed we had emotionally exploited her and promised her the baby during Martha's pregnancy. She called it a betrayal. She accused Martha of isolating me and insisted I was too emotionally vulnerable to make parental decisions. Her appeal alleged that Martha was domineering and that her pressure had harmed my mental health. Our lawyer reviewed everything meticulously. Rachel had also included letters from family members who had no actual involvement with James. An uncle from another state wrote that Rachel had always wanted to be a mother and was being robbed. Martha's second cousin wrote that she was emotionally locked off. Neither had ever seen us together in person. Our lawyer immediately began drafting a counterclaim. It included Martha's therapy documents, pediatrician reports, and police records. All cease and desist documentation, including the hidden camera incident, the daycare incident, and every occurrence complete with names, dates, images, and legal follow-up. We produced a comprehensive paper trail demonstrating Rachel had never been promised custody, neither legally nor verbally, and that every step we took was a direct response to her ongoing harassment. I contacted someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Rachel's former therapist. While she was no longer treating Rachel, she agreed to send a confidential letter expressing concern about Rachel's compulsive behavior and citing past patterns that aligned with what we were experiencing. That letter was signed, sealed, and delivered directly to the judge's office by our legal team. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. A gag order was immediately issued, prohibiting both parties from discussing the case online or with extended family, no social media mentions, no ambiguous posts, and no messages from third parties. Any violation could result in penalties. Martha and I meticulously went through every account we had: Facebook, email, photo apps, and cloud backups. We deleted all baby-related photos, removed any public references to our location, and enabled two-factor authentication. All friends and extended family members were removed from follower lists unless they were on our legal clearance list. New follower requests were ignored. 2 days later, the childcare worker called mid-morning. One of the staff members informed me that my mother had arrived at the front desk, claiming she was registered as James's guardian and was there to pick him up. She even carried an old photograph of herself with him. She became agitated when they requested her ID and emergency contact details. The director called the police. By the time I arrived, authorities were already speaking with the daycare team. My mother had left, but not without causing a scene. The police took witness testimony and issued a formal trespass order against her. She was now permanently banned from the facility. Our lawyer received the report, which included the names of the witnesses. That incident alone was enough to bolster our protection order request. The following week, one of my aunts called to gently warn us. Rachel had secretly been telling people for years that if she couldn't have a baby, she wanted to raise mine. She explained that she was always supposed to be James's mother. She had reportedly framed it as a promise, telling others I had considered it and we were still figuring out how to proceed. None of it was true, but it explained why so many relatives believed her version of events. I printed out emails from the week James was born, messages where I shared infant photos, hospital updates, and even a receipt for his birth certificate listing Martha and me as parents. We filed them along with our signed parental plan, a notarized document from early in the pregnancy that outlined our responsibilities, insurance coverage, and medical decision-making roles. Martha started working part-time from home again. We settled into a new routine. Her shifts in the mornings, mine in the evenings, alternating based on James's needs. We shared a secure drive with our lawyer to facilitate document access. I upgraded our security system again, adding remote access, motion alarms, and encrypted backup. I also bought a fireproof safe. I kept every court document, police report, email correspondence, and legal contract there, making 2 copies of everything, one printed, one digital. Our lawyer reviewed Rachel's filing and gave us a clear assessment. It relied on emotion, not evidence. There were no contracts written, agreements, or guardianship paperwork, just feelings, pressure, and a narrative built on sympathy. The judge scheduled a full custody hearing for the following month. From this point forward, everything would be resolved in court. No more text, front yard visits, flowers, notes, or fake pickups. It was official now, and we were ready. Pretrial hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. Martha and I arrived early with our lawyer and an entire binder of evidence. The courtroom was quiet, with only a few people present.
Ice.
Rachel sat on the opposite side with her legal team, while my parents sat silently behind her. After reviewing the timeline, the judge issued a temporary restraining order against all 3, Rachel, my mother, and my father. It would remain in effect until the final custody decision. They were prohibited from approaching or contacting us, directly or through anyone else. The judge also reinstated the gag order. No one was allowed to discuss the case publicly or privately, including friends, neighbors, or online posts. No more backdoor attempts to contact us or sway others. Back at our home, I installed a new intercom system with a built-in video feed and cloud recording. I added a backup drive and connected it to a hidden router. The footage was encrypted and transmitted in real time to our lawyer and a secure contact at the local police station. No one could show up without being documented. A week later, we received a call from a court-appointed child welfare worker. She planned a series of unannounced house visits to assess James's living conditions, emotional development, and our parenting habits. We were told not to expect a precise schedule, but to continue our daily lives as usual. The first visit occurred 3 days later in the afternoon. The specialist walked through each room, took notes, spoke to both of us individually, and observed James interacting with his toys and routines. The second visit happened early the next week. This time, she observed breakfast, nap preparation, and playtime. She thoroughly inquired about sleep schedules, developmental milestones, and emotional attachment. After her final interview, she filed an official report with the court. There were no concerns. She described James as happy, safe, and thriving. His emotional bond to his parents was noted as strong and clearly healthy. Rachel's legal team tried to postpone the trial again, filing a motion requesting more time to gather further emotional evidence, whatever that meant. The judge denied it immediately. Our previously submitted documentation was comprehensive, and the court found no reason to delay. Our attorney then introduced a psychological evaluation from 5 years prior. Rachel's past assessment related to her infertility treatments, documents lawfully obtained through her former therapist's cooperation. revealed long-term trauma responses, deep cycles of grief, and mental instability, while the documents didn't portray her as malicious. They did show she was unwell, and that her pain had significantly influenced her behavior. Around this time, my department manager called. They offered me a permanent remote position, which I accepted that same day. This meant I could stay home, help Martha, and keep an eye on things without missing work. We rearranged our schedules so we could both be present for most of James's day. Then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. He wasn't involved in any of the drama, but he'd been accidentally added to a private message group. In that group, Rachel wrote that Martha was about to give up on parenting. She claimed Martha had mentally checked out and that I was in over my head. She was still pushing the narrative that James belonged to her. The screenshots were timestamped and given to our lawyer as additional evidence for the file. A day later, our landlord contacted me. Someone claiming to be from Child Protective Services had stopped by, requesting entry to our apartment. The landlord was suspicious. When questioned, the individual lacked a badge, refused to give a full name, and quickly fled. Before leaving, the landlord took a photo with his phone. The person was one of Rachel's closest friends. The next morning, we filed a complaint with local authorities. The landlord agreed to testify in court if needed. Martha resumed therapy and was formally diagnosed with situational anxiety. After several sessions, her therapist wrote a professional statement explaining the effects of the continuous pressure and stalking on her health. It was more than just emotional. It was physical. Sleep disturbances, stomach issues, panic attacks. The letter was submitted to the court documents to demonstrate the psychological impact of the NTA situation on James's primary caregiver. We were also required to provide personal statements. Martha and I each created detailed timelines from the pregnancy to the present, outlining every incident and its repercussions. We documented the financial costs, emotional breakdowns, and family estrangement. Martha's testimony focused on her role as a mother and the constant fear she'd felt since Rachel began inserting herself. Mine centered on my own family's betrayal, their refusal to accept boundaries, the ambushes, rumors, and lies. We concluded our statements with the same simple plea. James deserved to grow up, without the burden of someone else's desperation. His home should remain peaceful, stable, and safe. Love, we argued, is defined by protection, not possession. The final hearing was just a week away. Everything was ready. The full custody hearing began early in the morning. Martha and I sat across from our lawyer, both silent, as the courtroom slowly filled. Rachel arrived with her legal team, and my parents sat silently behind her. The atmosphere felt cold, but controlled. The judge entered and immediately began proceedings. Our lawyer spoke first, guiding the court through a systematic timeline that included everything from Rachel's initial attempt to take the baby, Martha, to the most recent police reports and restraining orders. Every item was supported by evidence: texts, emails, voicemails, screenshots, witness statements, police files, package images, therapist evaluations, and 2 home assessments by the child welfare officer. Everything was presented logically and backed by facts. Rachel's team followed, relying heavily on emotion. They portrayed Rachel as a woman devastated by infertility, betrayed by a younger brother who had stolen her only chance at motherhood. They depicted Martha as cold and controlling, severing a loving sister's bond with her nephew. They called it tragic. They used the word cruel. Then my parents took the stand. My mother claimed I was unstable and had always struggled with responsibility. My father stated Martha manipulated me into abandoning my family. Neither provided dates or verification, only anecdotes and opinions. The court repeatedly interrupted, asking for specific examples of harm or neglect. There were none. Every response circled back to emotion and expectation, not fact. When Rachel was cross-examined, she admitted to referring to James as her son. During a private chat, she tried to explain it away as grief and loss. Our lawyer then played a recorded call of Rachel and a friend, in which Rachel explained her intention to intervene when they crashed and burned and take what should have been mine. The room fell silent. The childcare manager was next. Explained how Rachel had walked in unannounced and tried to change James's emergency contact information, claiming to be his legal guardian. The management refused, requested documentation, and contacted the police. She testified that Rachel's conduct resulted in a formal trespass order and a permanent ban from the facility.
Else.
The judge took notes. He asked the childcare manager if she had ever observed any signs of neglect or instability in Martha or me. She said no. Then a coworker from my department who had never met Martha testified about my workplace behavior, stress management, and how I discussed parenting. He described me as patient, consistent, and attentive. His testimony was factual and consistent, not emotional. The court-appointed child welfare officer delivered her final report. She described our home as stable and secure. She observed James's strong bond with his parents, his emotional development, and how Martha and I divided responsibilities. She informed the court that no changes in custody were recommended. Her voice remained steady. My therapist provided a note verifying I had no history of instability or aggression and had maintained emotional control throughout the ordeal despite continuous harassment. Martha's medical data had been previously reviewed. Rachel's team attempted one last tactic. They brought out the baby clothes and nursery items Rachel had given in the early months, claiming it was a financial investment and an early indicator of parental intent. The court dismissed the argument on the spot, stating that giving gifts did not constitute a parenting agreement and advised the legal team not to use emotional gestures as legal proof. Our lawyer delivered his closing argument. He emphasized boundaries, safety, and legal precedent. He stated that the court needed to consider whether obsession, desperation, and entitlement could override parental rights and documented safety. He urged the court to protect a child's right to stability from extended family conflict. The court called for a brief recess. When the judge reappeared, the courtroom remained silent. He ruled in our favor. Martha and I were granted full legal and physical custody of James. Rachel was denied any visitation. My parents were also prohibited from communicating with us. The judge made it clear that any future attempts to interfere directly or indirectly would result in criminal charges and immediate legal action. He ordered that all third-party communications, smear campaigns, and indirect contact cease permanently. Any violation would lead to enforcement without further hearings. He didn't conclude the ruling with emotion. He ended with the word law. Rachel looked stunned. My mother turned her head away. My father simply sat motionless. The judge's final statement was brief. This child deserves peace, not pressure. The case is closed. A week after the hearing, we received the formal written decision. Martha and I were awarded full and permanent custody of James. The judge also granted a permanent restraining order against Rachel, my mother, and my father. The verdict detailed everything. No visits, no communication, no third-party messaging, and no physical presence near our home, daycare, or workplaces. In the written decision, the judge included a specific requirement. Rachel was barred from filing any future custody appeals until she underwent formal psychological therapy and received clearance from a court-approved, licensed mental health expert. Without it, her case would not be considered. 4 days later, my father violated the restraining order. He sent an email to my work address. It was brief, something about making things right. I didn't open it fully. I forwarded it to our lawyer, who immediately contacted the authorities. A warrant was issued for violating the court order. He was arrested that same week and released on conditional bail. The court imposed even stricter no-contact orders. One more transgression, and the next arrest would result in automatic jail time. We haven't heard from him since. Martha and I began the legal process to change James's last name. We wanted a clean break from the family members who saw him as a consolation prize. Our lawyer filed the petition, and we obtained the necessary documents. We added them to a new binder we'd created, which we named the Legacy folder. This folder contained more than just legal papers. It included letters, photographs, receipts, and handwritten notes, a copy of the judge's decision, a letter from the pediatrician, and a printed screenshot of Rachel's friend's message about reclaiming what is hers. We plan to give James that folder when he's old enough. We'll let him see for himself why we fought and won. Several weeks later, I accepted a promotion at work. It came with a raise and confirmed my permanent remote position. We used the extra money to execute a plan we'd put on hold months ago. Moving to a small beach town Martha had always dreamed of living in. We chose a single-story house with a fenced yard, within walking distance of the beach. We didn't inform anyone outside our trusted circle. Martha continued her therapy. Her sessions became less frequent, and her therapist noted her significant progress. She began volunteering with a local organization that helps new mothers cope with toxic family pressure. She never spoke publicly about our experience, but she knew exactly what to say to women on the verge of burnout. I joined a peer support group for men dealing with custody issues and family interference. I didn't use my full name. I shared our story, described the actions we took, and mentioned the tools that helped. A couple of men messaged me personally after meetings, thanking me for being direct and clear. They weren't looking for impassioned speeches. They were looking for a roadmap. Rachel reportedly sold her home and left the state, according to an update shared by a relative my aunt texted. A brief update: Rachel had voluntarily enrolled in a long-term mental health program in another city. She was now receiving treatment, but my aunt said she still viewed herself as a victim. She hadn't apologized, reached out, or acknowledged the court's decision. Word of the case spread among the extended family. Cousin distributed copies of the verdict to a few family members who had initially supported Rachel. People quietly began to distance themselves from my parents. I heard some had blocked their numbers. Some even cut off contact entirely. No grand announcements, just silence. James turned 1 last month. We didn't throw a big party, just the 3 of us. Martha baked a small cake, which we let James demolish with both hands in the middle of the living room. We took some photos for ourselves. There was no social media, no family invitations, no outside presence, just balloons, music, and calm. Later that night, after James had fallen asleep, I opened an old notebook and jotted down one more entry. Not for court or evidence, but just for me. I wrote that peace doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like holding firm on boundaries. Sometimes it's simply the absence of chaos, I wrote. That giving things up doesn't show love. Standing guard does. No parent should be expected to sacrifice their child to keep someone else's fantasy alive. We walked to the beach the next morning. Martha held James's hand on one side. I held the other. He took short, wobbly steps through the sand. The wind was gentle. The waves were quiet.